In today's video, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite cameras that I own, the Sony FX3. Now, most times when you do a tech review, it's like when you just got the thing out of the box. I've had this camera now for almost 2 years. Not 2 years, because I got it in December 22. So it's almost like a year and a couple of months. There are certain things that I don't like about the camera, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, because I feel like a lot of people don't talk about them. They make us feel like these cameras are perfect. So one challenge that I've had with this camera, and this is something that just happened recently, and when I started researching it, because it happened to me, you start to realize this is something that a lot of people have covered, but you never think about it because it doesn't happen to you. So the Sony FX3 has 2 slots for your SD card, right? So you have slot 1 and slot 2. And here's what's happening with mine now is when you put the SD card in slot 1, it doesn't attach anymore. So this happens due to a lot of reasons. One can be something, there's debris inside there. They said there's a lot of things that can happen. And I've tried a lot of the YouTube things that people say to do, and it doesn't work. So now I have to send it for repair because it's out of warranty, which is a bummer. And one person that I saw who did it on Reddit, they paid $400 to get it fixed. Mind you, this is a $5,000 camera, so you don't really want it to be touched by some random hands unless $5,000 comes to you very easily. For me, it doesn't. So yeah. And the thing is, the camera, if you want to update the firmware, like we heard about the shutter coming, the rolling shutter, where we're now moving to degrees and stuff, like all those functionalities, if you want to get it, you have to use slot 1, and slot 1 is the most used. And if that malfunctions like mine, then you are caught up in a weird situation where you can't update your camera, you can't do anything to it. So for me, that's a big challenge that I have to figure out how to sort out somehow. But that's a cost whereby you're not really thinking about, what if my SD card doesn't get accepted by my camera? And I think one of the other challenges that I think the camera has, and maybe it's a Sony thing, whereby Sony pushes you to use Sony products. Like with the batteries, they just like I have a small rig dummy battery, and it recently stopped working because of the firmware update. Like we didn't know why it wasn't working. We were like, hey, we just got this thing 2 weeks ago and it was working perfectly, and then it just stopped working. Like it wouldn't accept it. So those things, then it's like, man, now like we have to find different solutions. Thankfully on that day, the battery that we had a USB, so we just connected the USB that came with the charger for the camera and ran it that way. But then those are some things that are just inconvenient in terms of, workflow and stuff like that. Because I think on the day of the shoot, what you want to do is to shoot, right? And I get some people will be like, hey, you should have done prep. But, it's a camera that I've owned for over a year. You feel like your stuff, and we had used it for a different project. But that was a lesson learned. The other thing that I have, a lot of times with full frame cameras, we don't really speak about the cost and thinking about, is it worth it, right? So right now, if you want to buy a decent lens, by decent I mean cine lens, right? You're looking at DZO being in your intro, and one DZO lens costs around $2,000. Yes, there are some lenses that are less than that, but the thing is with film that I've learned is you get what you pay for. You can be creative, you can be whatever, but you get what you pay for in terms of quality, the quality image that you get at the end of the day. There's a difference. There's a reason some lenses go for $20,000 for a single lens, and some lenses go for $5,000. Some lenses go for $2,000. Some lenses go for $300, right? And what happens is if you're using an APS-C sensor, you have more options and you have cheaper options, which then allow you to really express your full creativity. And that for me has been a challenge, because it's like, okay, I need to buy a lens. Then you're thinking about what's the cost-effective way of getting a lens. Should I get a lens or should I get lights? Should I get this or should I get that? And it's a difficult position to be in because, film really does cost a lot and it's not a game for everybody. I get that. But the thing that I'm starting to I wish in the time when I got my camera, the FX3 was out. I think I would have gone with that, and then that way the focus would be more on the creativity than in terms of, okay, what type of lens can we use? Like, you can use any lens and do the things that you want to do, but I'm very limited in terms of the quality of work that I can produce. For me, one thing that people often speak about is like, oh, you can do this. I remember one time a teacher was like, if people knew what you're working with in order to achieve these results, it would be amazing. But then I feel like that's very limiting, right? Like, you can be very skilled and talented, but you don't want to be limited by the tools that you have. So it's a thing to think about if you're going for this full frame cameras cost. And you can use APS-C lenses on your full frame camera. I think it has APS-C mode. The challenge with that for me is, what's the point? What's the point of spending $5,000 when you could have spent half of it and gotten a camera and used the lens that was meant for it for that, And it's a go around, but it's like, so why did I have to spend all this money for this thing? It's something that you have to think about. So for me, I think when you're making your research before you purchase a camera, try to look at the negatives to it. People will be nice because it gets more views, but like, I wish I knew this was a possibility. Then I would have kept at least 500 on the side when my warranty was running out, to know that my camera needs to be repaired. And the other thing that I would like to talk about is something that in the past year my mindset was, I'm a Sony shooter, I'm loyal to Sony, I'll never move. Like, my dream camera is the Venice. But there's something about looking at different camera bodies and looking at different types of work and getting the right tool for the perfect job, for the right job. I feel like if you look at the FX3, if you look at the A7 IV, that bracket range, like, these are quite expensive cameras, I get, but they're not the most expensive as well, right? I think once you move past budget, cameras really become about use case. What can you use? I used a camera that requires SDI outputs, that is ND filters. If you're shooting outside, those things become handy, and the less stuff that you have to carry with you become handy. With this camera, there's no internal ND filters, and that's a challenge that a lot of people speak about. But before you need to use them, it's like, who cares, right? But I think those are some things that you want to think about. I think at the price range, it's a steal of a camera, the things that it can do, but also it's very limited because you're only getting HDMI out. You can only shoot RAW via Atomos Ninja. When I used a Red Komodo, you were like, whoa, I didn't know cameras can do this. I didn't know you could push things like this, and that exposure is just something else. A camera that I cannot wait to get my hands on is the Arri Alexa. The closest I've come is just testing it. There's a way that Arri just looks, when you're watching a lot of these movies that are made on Arri, even on Red, you can tell. And on Sony, like, don't get me wrong, Sony creates some of the craziest cameras I've seen, some of the craziest quality. And a lot of times, the final picture that you see, good or bad, is because of the person behind. And I think that at this space of content creation, Sony is great, Canon is great, whatever. But the more that I'm starting to think about my career as a cinematographer, director, in the long run, I'm starting to realize that there's better out there. I haven't used Blackmagic. I've been on sets that use Blackmagic. I didn't understand the menu system and stuff like that. And people often say that the colors are great. But as someone who's only used Sony for my creative approaches, I like the Sony colors. I like what I get out of it. And I like using S-Log and color grading S-Log, But one thing I'm not moving for is loyal to a single brand. Like, I think if there's ever a time where using the Blackmagic makes sense, I'll move on to it. Like, I've been looking at the Pocket 4K, not gonna lie, just because I'm looking at I'm looking at cost of lenses, because right now I feel like I'm very limited in terms of the type of lens that I can buy. I'm not yet at a position where I can just be throwing around money to get lenses. Like, I'm looking at the DZOs, and that's $2,000. So it's like, okay, I need a set of maybe three. That's $6,000 just going into those lenses, and then you have to upgrade the camera and stuff like that. But I think investing in lenses is better than investing in camera, because whilst cameras can be outdated, lenses really don't, because each lens just has a certain texture to it. And with my thought then is like, yeah, if you get a decent lens, and the other thing is, no matter which lens you have, no matter the mount that they have, there's an adapter. You might lose certain things. Let's say if you want to use a Canon lens on a Sony, then you're losing things such as autofocus or whatever. But also, it's like, what type of shooter are you? So if you're buying like Cine lenses, we just move, it's either PL or EF, I think. So those are things to think about. And I think for me, a better investment moving forward will be into lenses, lights, camera body, not so much. I like my FX3. I mean, once we get the slot one fixed, I feel like it's a camera I can use for the next 3-4 years, depending, if the money starts flowing in. That Burano looks amazing. I feel like red is the next step for me, like the Komodo X, or I'll look into the Blackmagic Ursa, but I don't really know. Like, we'll see when we get there. But I think that the main thing you have to think about when you're thinking about gear and all these reviews that people make, which are amazing, what are you going to use it for? If I think about the amount of cameras that have come out from the time that I got my Sony, the first Sony that I ever got was the A6400, and that was in 2021, I think. And when you think about in the last 3 years how many cameras have come out, it's ridiculous. And do you need all of them? No. Like, I don't even think for taking photos I'm gonna switch from a S7 IV anytime soon. The camera does what I needed to do. It's about me improving my skills behind it, and then we'll be able to start saying, oh, now it doesn't work, let me get the next thing. But yeah, so in this video I just wanted to share with you guys some things that I've learned as I've used the camera, some things that have gone wrong, some things to look out for. The craziest thing is when it happens to you, that's the only time you ever start searching for it, and then you realize it's been happening to a lot of people. But it is what it is.